Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new NVIDIA daily update video. So today, as per usual, let's talk about NVIDIA stock. Let's talk about what is happening with the stock, what we can expect moving forward, and all of that good stuff. So also, as per usual, if you enjoy, ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis updates, etc., I do have a membership section on YouTube where I share these kind of updates pretty much every day. The market is trading, as the market is trading, I should say, every day, mainly on Tesla stock for $3 a month. And sometimes I'll share bonus stock updates as well, like AMD or Costco today, for instance, or anything that I find really. Or for $5 a month, you get access to all of that, plus NVIDIA daily updates as well, plus everything I just said included, of course. So link is below. I'd love to have you there. But jumping into it in video with a pretty lackluster day, to say the least, up only about 0.3% on the day, which isn't anything to really write home about, closing at 138.5, we'll say, per share, which compared to the market, arguably a bit of an underperformance with, for instance, QQQ up 1.1%. So let's talk about it, right? What does this mean for NVIDIA moving forward? Well, the market bias, you can see here, we are arguably, or potentially rather, maybe turning it back into a resistance. But the main thing is this EMA cloud, right, which is the 21 and the 8, which, like I mentioned, a few days ago, crossed to the downside. This hasn't happened since this rally began all the way down here. It is now crossed to the downside, right, to the red, essentially, the 8 crossed below the 21. So that's not ideal, right? Like I said, despite on, what was it, back here actually on Wednesday, calling the bottom, or at least getting close to the bottom. I mentioned many times on the 4-hour chart, right? If you look at these bands, for instance, right? I mentioned how, we're probably at close to the bottom. So despite calling that, I did say how my main targets to the upside, the first level is about $140, and the next level will be about $145-ish, which of course are just simply the Fibonacci retracement levels, which happen to line up with these clouds as well, right? 382, 618, and best case scenario, like I said, I don't think we'll get there, is 150. Oh, close to 150. I don't think we'll get there though, at least not yet. But we are finding issues here. We are finding issues at this this 140-ish region. You can see if I also look at my bands, my oversold, overbought bands. If I remove this for now, oops, not this one, sorry. If I remove this one for now, pretty much came almost like to perfection, right to that median line, which is essentially a reversion to the mean, and we got an almost perfect rejection on there as well on the 4-hour. Not so much on the daily, of course, but the 4-hour, pretty much a perfect rejection, right? And that's kind of where we're finding our problem here, right? This is where NVIDIA will need to start closing candles back above 140, really, 4-hour, even 1 hour, really, but ideally like a 4-hour or a daily candle back above 140 for NVIDIA to finally get some potential, momentum moving forward and make its way to 145, right? That's we need to recapture 140 to get to see 145. But the fact that we're rejecting pretty decently, and on the 4-hour we actually printed an inverted hammer candle essentially, is not a good sign. And there's a few other signs that I'm not a huge fan of, right, which I'll go over in the options flow very quickly. But just seeing this candle alone on the 4-hour chart excuse me, is not ideal, right? This is not the kind of candle you want to be seeing right now, right? Especially on this little small micro uptrend. This kind of signifies a potential top, right? So, there are some signs of concern for NVIDIA. So that's why I'm not overly excited. I did actually take profit on my shares and whatnot. I was going to do cover calls, but I decided to just take profit on the shares instead. And I just want to see what happens here. I want to see what happens here. And the main reason is because if I go to the options flow, which I'll go over right now very quickly, a lot of puts came in on NVIDIA, like a pretty shocking amount of puts came in on NVIDIA in the afternoon around 1:30 to as late as about 1:30 p.m. roughly is when, this just absolutely astronomical sequence of puts came in. And I don't understand for what reason or why, but clearly someone knows something, or this is just a false, bait, if you will. But starting at 1:30 for about 10 minutes, just an obscene amount of puts just rolled in. And the thing that made me extra cautious about them, like surely, they're not, each of them is like 100K, 200K. Some of them are 600K, of course. So it's not like millions and millions technically. I mean, individually, of course, but if you add it up, it's probably several millions. But the thing that really caught my attention, the thing that really made me kind of, raise my eyebrows and be a little bit more on the cautious end here, at least for now, because I want to see what is going on here. Like, this is one of those things where it gets my attention, right? They're all for this week. That's the thing that got my attention. They're all for this week. Every single one of these, and there's a lot of them. You can see here, like literally all of these right here came in one after the other within 10 minutes of each other. All for this week, all expiring this Friday. So I don't know what this means, why this is happening, or who knows what, essentially, right? But clearly somebody with, probably a good amount of money is expecting NVIDIA to probably gap down as early as tomorrow, or probably latest, in my opinion, Wednesday. So clearly they expect some downside for NVIDIA here. And I'm not someone that's going to stand in the way of this. I don't mind to sit back, kind of wait, see what happens. If it comes back down and it makes its way down lower, which I'll talk about my, downward targets, Congratulations, it happened. I will now be ready to buy that dip and ride this thing back up. Or if this is a false alarm and I see NVIDIA start closing back above 140, great, I can start entering on some strength and play to 145. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it right now, right? But this really caught my eye. This really made me go on a little bit on the more defensive side for now. So that's the main reason. Now, let's say NVIDIA does move down. Let's say NVIDIA does make its way down. Where can I see it possibly move down? Let's say, it does reject, right? We hit that 0.382 Fibonacci retracement level, which I've talked about on, several days ago. Pretty much rejection almost to perfection right at it. Okay, great. And again, the reason I'm using a bearish version of Fibonacci retracement, the reason I'm going from up here to down here instead of like a bullish version, which is starting from the bottom going up essentially, right? And the reason I'm retracing a bearish, essentially dead cat-ish type bounce is because we made a lower low, right? The reason is simply we made a lower low. Now, again, I said, every time, whenever a stock makes a lower low like this, I assume that the next move is going to be a potential, bearish, kind of dead cat bearish little bounce because we made this lower low. Now I expect this move to be essentially setting up a lower high. And then, the next question is what happens after this, right? And that's why I'm using a bearish Fibonacci retracing from up here to down here, retracing it. We got to the first measured move essentially, or not measured move. We got to the first retracement level. And now, well, let's see what happens next, right? So assuming we do reject from here, assuming this is the place where we do reject and make our way lower, there's two things that I'm eyeballing pretty aggressively or closely. Actually, three things. I would actually argue three things. One of which is bullish, one of which is still bullish, just less bullish, and one of which is just straight up bearish. The bullish one is this. The bullish one is going to be a pretty simple inverted head and shoulders, right? Bullish head and shoulders, where there's a chance where NVIDIA rejects, makes its way lower to about 135, 136, something like that. And ultimately, we set up this little small 4-hour head and shoulders pattern, right? Bullish, of course, head and shoulders pattern. Looks a little bit better on the 1-hour chart, right? But it would look something like this. That is a possibility. That is a possibility. That's the kind of bullish side. Like, yeah, short term, it still has a little bit of a drawdown, but nothing's really crazy. If that were to happen, it's only like a 2% drawdown. That's pretty much nothing for NVIDIA, right? That's the bullish one. That's the bullish one. And if assuming this level holds, assuming we come down to 135, 136, and it holds, congratulations. I think it's looking pretty solid. And I think we could potentially hold this general vicinity and make our way higher to 145, maybe even 150. I still expect a lower high for now, of course, until proven otherwise. But it would be obviously, not too much more of a drawdown from here, but a nice move up still to potentially still, finish off this, what could be a dead cat bounce more or less, right? A little bit of a retracement here. That's something else I'll be watching for moving forward. Now that's like I said, that's kind of the more bullish perspective of it. Now, the still somewhat bullish, but a little bit more bearish short-term perspective is a potential double bottom, right? There's a chance what we do instead is obviously we get a rejection from here, like I said, make our way lower, follow these puts. It does make its way lower, but ultimately we could potentially make our way back down sometime this week. Literally could be easily tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, easily this week, all the way back down to the low 130s, right? About 132, 130, somewhere around that general vicinity, pretty much the low that we were on at about Wednesday. And what can that could set up a pretty interesting situation where we could be setting up a potential double bottom play. It would look something like this. That could be a pretty overall bullish pattern, but short term a little bit bearish because it would draw down a little bit more aggressively. For instance, I move from here to there will be another like almost 5%, which is, a fair amount, right? 5% is not little, but that would be something that is still potential. I'd be watching for that very closely, and it would line up with this potential trend line that I definitely want to see NVIDIA hold, right? This is where, if this were to happen, we cannot lose this trend line, and we pretty much cannot lose 130 again. If NVIDIA loses 130, that's where I think the stock actually becomes pretty bearish. I don't think there's anything bullish about that whatsoever. There's no bullish thesis to potentially, spit out or anything like that. The stock becomes actually quite bearish, in my opinion, if we lose 130 from here. And that's the third perspective. That's the bearish perspective. We lose 130, right? So let's talk about that quickly. Let's say we do make our way lower. These puts come into fruition. We make our way lower. And let's say we don't hold here. We don't even hold the 130. We do not hold this trend line. And we break well below this trend line. Well, that's where NVIDIA gets very bearish. We start really, really completely and utterly breaking apart this bullish thesis, right? Not only does the lower and lower high become an actual problem, but we also pretty much fall out of this, what, seemingly is a pretty much rising channel or wedge. That would be very, very bearish because this was a very large, rising wedge or channel. And this is not what you want to be seeing as a bull, because if this were to happen, I think NVIDIA will make its way much, much lower. And ultimately, I genuinely wouldn't be surprised to see low 100s again somewhere, I don't know how long it'll take, obviously. You'll still have bounces. It's not just going to go completely and utterly straight down. You'll still probably get bounces and, whatever, right? But I would not be surprised to see, at the very least, the 1 teens, but also the 1 low 100s. I would not be surprised to see one of those levels if, of course, if, the big if still, not saying it's going to happen, just preparing you just in case it does, we break down below this trend line and lose 130. Really look at 130. That's probably the most important level, 130. Losing and especially closing a candle below 130. Very, very bearish, very, very bad for the bulls. I don't think it's going to happen. If I had to take a guess, I don't think it's going to happen. The market still looks pretty solid unless obviously something crazy happens across the world or whatever. The market looks good. The market actually looks pretty good. QQQ is breaking out of this little, nice little potential issue it could have had, breaking out, looking pretty solid. SPY's looking pretty solid overall, still making higher highs, higher lows. Like the market looks good. So it would be pretty shocking to see NVIDIA somehow go all the way like this, especially with the market looking like this. I don't think that's going to happen. That's why my personal scenario, I think, is at the very least, I think will come down to 136 to 135. That could be all she wrote. But the one I'm personally expecting is honestly a move down one more time, closer to the trend line, closer to the bottom of this rising wedge / channel. Hold this low 130s-ish area, maybe get a false breakdown similar to what AMD did not too long ago, but ultimately close back above 130. And then everyone gets scared, but ultimately what happens is, well, people that are, not able to get scared too easily, buy that dip, get very beautiful entry on a very nice risk versus reward scenario. And then we end up ripping higher into the end of December as NVIDIA can potentially at that point start making its continuation on the zigzagging of this rising kind of wedge, and make its way all the way up here once again, which would essentially put NVIDIA closer to the 160s towards the end of the month, which would be a pretty phenomenal Santa Claus rally, which again, if it does come all the way down to the low 130s and you get that entry and you ride it all the way up, it's a pretty much a 20% return in a month. That would be an absolutely phenomenal trade. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And that's honestly, NVIDIA is probably my biggest focus right now because I think this thing is setting up for what could be either a phenomenal trade or a very, very bearish looking stock. It really depends on how this plays out in the forward. Now this looks like I literally just looks like I just drew a penis. Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing for NVIDIA right now. For the bullish and the bearish side, that's my overall general perspective on NVIDIA as well. All the indicators down here you can see are still cross bearish. So, this will take some time. MACD is still bearish, RSI is still bearish. And even the stochastic is still bearish. On the 4-hour chart, they are starting to look a little bit better. But maybe the 4-hour chart can, help that daily chart look a little bit better as well moving forward. But anyway, that's what I'm expecting. Watch for those puts. I don't know what's happening with these puts, but it's definitely eyebrow raising. And I'm going to be watching this pretty closely the next day or two. Could be as early as tomorrow. Anyways, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.